10 Most Dangerous Inmates Inside ADX Florence, America's Toughest Prison. There is a prison in the United States designed not for rehabilitation, not for deterrence, but for absolute containment. This is ADX Florence, officially known as the United States Penitentiary Administrative Maximum Facility. It is widely recognized by corrections experts and federal authorities as the most secure prison in America. Every man held here has already proven that no other prison could control him. Some orchestrated violence from behind bars. Some murdered guards or fellow inmates. Some led terror networks or criminal empires that continue to operate even while incarcerated. ADX Florence exists for one purpose only: to isolate those deemed too dangerous for the rest of the federal prison system. Today, on Beyond the Bars, we are examining 10 of the most dangerous inmates ever housed inside ADX Florence. Based strictly on court records, government documentation, and verified reporting. What follows is not rumor. Not myth. Not dramatization. These are facts. Before we continue, if you value deeply researched, fully factual prison and crime documentaries, consider liking this video and subscribing to Beyond the Bars. Your support directly helps us continue producing long-form stories that prioritize accuracy, depth, and responsible storytelling. Now, let's go inside. What makes ADX Florence different? ADX Florence opened in 1994 after a series of catastrophic failures in the federal prison system. The final catalyst was the 1983 murder of 2 federal correctional officers at USP Marion in Illinois, an event that convinced the Bureau of Prisons that some inmates could not be safely managed under traditional incarceration models. ADX Florence was the answer. Here, inmates typically spend 22 to 23 hours a day alone in single-person concrete cells measuring approximately 7 by 12 feet. Human contact is minimal. Meals are eaten alone. Recreation, when permitted, takes place in isolated outdoor cages often referred to as dog runs. Communication between inmates is deliberately restricted. Windows are narrow and angled to prevent seeing the sky or surrounding mountains. Every movement is controlled, scheduled, and monitored. Placement at ADX is not a sentence handed down by a judge. It is an administrative decision by the Bureau of Prisons, based on behavior, threat assessments, and security risk. And once someone arrives here, release back to a lower security facility is rare. How this list was determined? This list is not based on notoriety alone. Each inmate included meets at least one of the following documented criteria. Proven involvement in extreme violence inside prison. Leadership of criminal or terrorist organizations. Crimes that continued or escalated while incarcerated. Official designation by federal authorities as requiring maximum isolation. Importantly, dangerous does not mean sensational. Some individuals on this list are not household names, but their documented actions place them among the most serious security threats in U.S. custody. We begin with number 10. Number 10. Thomas Silverstein. Thomas Silverstein was not originally sentenced to ADX Florence. In fact, his crimes inside prison are the reason ADX Florence exists in the form we know today. Silverstein was convicted in 1977 for armed robbery. While incarcerated, he became associated with the Aryan Brotherhood, a white supremacist prison gang recognized by federal authorities as a violent criminal organization. Between 1981 and 1983, Silverstein murdered 2 fellow inmates and 1 federal correctional officer. All while already in custody. The murder of Officer Merle Klutz at USP Marion in 1983 was especially significant. It marked the first time a federal correctional officer had been killed on duty since 1937. Following that murder, Silverstein was placed under what became known as no human contact conditions, a level of isolation unprecedented in modern U.S. corrections. When ADX Florence opened in 1994, Silverstein was transferred there and held in extreme isolation for decades. He died in federal custody in 2019 at the age of 67. His death was attributed to natural causes, though he had spent more than 36 consecutive years in solitary confinement, the longest documented period in U.S. history. Silverstein's actions directly influenced the design philosophy of ADX Florence, cementing his place as one of the most dangerous inmates ever housed within the federal system. Thomas Silverstein helped shape the prison meant to contain men like him. But he was only one. Number 9, Ramzi Yousef. Ramzi Yousef was already considered one of the most dangerous terrorists in U.S. custody long before ADX Florence was built to house men like him. Yousef was the mastermind of the 1993 World Trade Center bombing, an attack intended to collapse the North Tower into the South Tower. The plan failed, but the explosion killed 6 people and injured more than 1,000. What made Yousef especially dangerous, according to U.S. prosecutors, was not just the attack itself, but his broader operational role. Court records show he was deeply involved in international terrorist plotting, including the Bojinka plot, a mid-1990s plan to bomb multiple U.S.-bound airliners over the Pacific Ocean. The full scope of Bojinka was disrupted before execution, but investigators later confirmed that Yousef had already conducted test explosions aboard commercial aircraft. Captured in Pakistan in 1995 and extradited to the United States, Yousef was convicted in federal court on charges including conspiracy to commit terrorism and murder. He was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole, plus additional consecutive terms. Initially held at other federal facilities, Yousef was later transferred to ADX Florence due to the Bureau of Prisons' determination that his communications posed an ongoing national security risk. At ADX, Yousef was placed under Special Administrative Measures, or SAMs, restrictions that severely limit communication with anyone outside his legal team. These measures were implemented to prevent him from inspiring or directing further attacks. As of the most recent publicly available information, Yousef remains incarcerated at ADX Florence. Number 8, Terry Nichols. Terry Nichols is often described as the quieter partner in one of the deadliest acts of domestic terrorism in American history. In 1995, Nichols assisted Timothy McVeigh in planning and carrying out the bombing of the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City. The explosion killed 168 people, including 19 children, and injured hundreds more. While McVeigh was executed in 2001, Nichols received multiple life sentences after being convicted in both federal and state courts. Unlike McVeigh, Nichols survived, and the federal government had to determine how to safely incarcerate him for life. Initially held at USP Florence High, Nichols was later transferred to ADX Florence due to the extreme nature of his crimes and documented concerns about his influence on other inmates. Court records and Bureau of Prisons statements indicate that Nichols maintained extremist beliefs after his conviction. While there is no publicly documented evidence that he successfully coordinated violence from inside prison, federal authorities concluded that his ideological commitment and notoriety made him a high-risk inmate. At ADX Florence, Nichols was subjected to long-term isolation and communication restrictions similar to those imposed on international terrorists. His placement was not based on disciplinary infractions alone, but on a preventive security assessment. Reflecting the Bureau of Prisons' conclusion that even passive influence could be dangerous. As of the latest verified reporting, Terry Nichols remains alive and incarcerated at ADX Florence. Not every inmate at ADX Florence arrived there because of bombs or mass casualty attacks. Some arrived because their minds, rather than explosives, were considered the threat. Number 7, Ted Kaczynski. For nearly 2 decades, the FBI searched for a man known only by a nickname, the Unabomber. That man was Ted Kaczynski. Between 1978 and 1995, Kaczynski carried out a nationwide bombing campaign that targeted universities, airlines, and individuals he associated with modern technology. His attacks killed 3 people and injured 23 others, some permanently. Kaczynski was not driven by chaos, but by ideology. Court records and his own writings show he believed industrial society was destroying human freedom. His bombs were meticulously engineered, often designed to maim rather than kill, an aspect prosecutors described as especially disturbing. In 1996, after his manifesto was published in major newspapers, Kaczynski was identified by his own brother and arrested at a remote cabin in Montana. He pleaded guilty in 1998 to multiple federal charges and was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Due to the complexity of his crimes, his intellectual influence, and concerns that his writings could inspire future violence, the Bureau of Prisons transferred Kaczynski to ADX Florence. While incarcerated, Kaczynski continued to write extensively. Some of his correspondence was later archived by academic institutions, though his communications were heavily monitored. There is no public record of Kaczynski committing violent acts while in federal custody. His designation as dangerous rested on the long-term impact of his ideology and the potential for radicalization, not on prison misconduct. Kaczynski died in federal custody in 2023 at the age of 81. Official statements reported his death as a suicide, though detailed circumstances were not fully disclosed publicly. Number 6, Richard Reid. On December 22, 2001, passengers aboard American Airlines Flight 63 noticed something was wrong. A man later identified as Richard Reid attempted to ignite explosives concealed inside his shoe while the plane traveled from Paris to Miami. The device failed. Passengers and crew restrained Reid until the aircraft made an emergency landing in Boston. Reid was later revealed to be a member of Al-Qaeda who had trained in terrorist camps in Afghanistan. Investigators determined that had the device detonated as intended, it could have caused catastrophic damage to the aircraft. In 2003, Reid pleaded guilty in federal court to terrorism-related charges. During sentencing, he openly declared loyalty to Al-Qaeda, statements that were entered into the court record. He was sentenced to 3 life terms plus 110 years, ensuring he would never be released. Due to his unwavering extremist ideology and continued verbal threats, Reid was transferred to ADX Florence under special administrative measures. According to Bureau of Prisons documentation and court filings, these measures were designed to prevent Reid from communicating with extremist networks or inspiring copycat attacks. There is no publicly documented evidence that Reid has attempted violence while incarcerated at ADX Florence. However, federal authorities have consistently classified him as a high-risk national security inmate. As of the most recent verified information, Richard Reid remains incarcerated at ADX Florence. So far, we've examined inmates whose danger came from ideology, planning, and mass casualty intent. But some men earned their place at ADX Florence not for what they planned, but for what they did inside prison walls. Number 5. Joaquin, El Chapo, Guzman. For decades, Joaquin Archivaldo Guzman Lora was one of the most powerful drug traffickers on earth. Known globally as Joaquin Guzman, he led the Sinaloa cartel, an organization responsible, according to U.S. prosecutors, for moving massive quantities of cocaine, heroin, methamphetamine, and marijuana into the United States. But what ultimately landed Guzman at ADX Florence was not just the scale of his drug empire, it was his proven ability to escape prison. Guzman escaped from Mexican prisons twice, once in 2001 and again in 2015, the latter through a mile-long underground tunnel dug directly into his cell shower. Both escapes were extensively documented by Mexican and U.S. authorities. After his final capture and extradition to the United States in 2017, Guzman was tried in federal court in Brooklyn. Testimony detailed decades of cartel violence, including murders, kidnappings, and corruption. Witnesses, including former cartel insiders, testified that Guzman authorized killings and torture as tools of control. In 2019, he was convicted on multiple counts, including continuing criminal enterprise and conspiracy to commit murder. He was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, plus 30 years. Immediately following sentencing, the Bureau of Prisons transferred Guzman to ADX Florence. Federal officials stated in court filings that ADX was the only facility capable of preventing further escapes or communication with cartel networks. Guzman was placed under special administrative measures, severely restricting contact with the outside world. There is no public evidence that Guzman has directed cartel operations from inside ADX Florence. His placement there reflects the federal government's assessment of his past capabilities, not confirmed misconduct within the prison. As of the latest verified information, Joaquin, El Chapo, Guzman remains incarcerated at ADX Florence. Number 4, Zacharias Moussaoui. Zacharias Moussaoui occupies a unique, and deeply disturbing, place in American criminal history. He is the only person ever convicted in connection with the September 11, 2001 attacks. Moussaoui was not one of the hijackers. Instead, federal prosecutors proved that he was an al-Qaeda operative who conspired with the 9/11 plotters and had advanced knowledge of the attacks. Court records show that Moussaoui was arrested in August 2001 on immigration charges after arousing suspicion at a Minnesota flight school. After September 11, investigators concluded that he was intended as a potential backup hijacker. In 2006, after years of legal proceedings marked by disruptive courtroom behavior and ideological declarations, Moussaoui pleaded guilty to terrorism-related charges. A federal jury sentenced him to life imprisonment without parole, rejecting the death penalty. Following sentencing, the Bureau of Prisons transferred Moussaoui to ADX Florence. According to Department of Justice filings, his placement was driven by several factors. His unwavering allegiance to al-Qaeda. Repeated threats made during court proceedings. Concerns that he could inspire or radicalize other inmates. At ADX Florence, Moussaoui was placed under the most restrictive special administrative measures available at the time. While incarcerated, Moussaoui has made multiple public statements through court filings expressing extremist views. However, there is no publicly documented evidence that he has engaged in violence while inside ADX Florence. Federal authorities continue to classify him as a high-risk national security inmate due to ideology and symbolic significance rather than documented prison misconduct. As of the most recent confirmed reporting, Zacharias Moussaoui remains incarcerated at ADX Florence. So far, we've examined terrorists, cartel leaders, and ideologues. But the final names on this list represent something else entirely, men whose violence inside prison itself forced the federal system to tighten control even further. Number 3, Juan Garcia Abrego. Before the rise of modern cartel leaders, one man quietly built the financial and logistical blueprint for transnational drug trafficking. Juan Garcia Abrego was the undisputed leader of the Gulf Cartel during the late 1980s and early 1990s. A period when Mexican drug organizations began evolving into sophisticated, militarized enterprises. U.S. federal court records describe Garcia Abrego as one of the first cartel leaders to establish direct Colombian supply routes, bypassing intermediaries and dramatically increasing cocaine flow into the United States. But what ultimately placed him among the most dangerous inmates in federal custody was not just narcotics trafficking. Prosecutors presented evidence linking Garcia Abrego to dozens of murders, widespread corruption, and the laundering of hundreds of millions of dollars through U.S. banks. His arrest in 1996 followed one of the most extensive international manhunts of the decade. After extradition to the United States, Garcia Abrego pleaded guilty to federal drug trafficking charges and was sentenced to 11 life sentences plus 1,000 years. Initially held in other high-security facilities, he was later transferred to ADX Florence. According to Bureau of Prisons assessments cited in court filings, his placement was driven by his historical command over violent criminal networks, the risk of influence over other organized crime inmates, intelligence indicating continued loyalty among cartel affiliates. There is no publicly confirmed evidence that Garcia Abrego has directed cartel operations from inside ADX Florence. However, federal authorities have consistently classified him as a long-term strategic threat due to his legacy influence. As of the most recent verifiable reporting, Juan Garcia Abrego remains incarcerated at ADX Florence. Number 2, Dzhokhar Tsarnaev. On April 15, 2013, 2 pressure cooker bombs detonated near the finish line of the Boston Marathon. The attack killed 3 people and injured more than 260 others, marking one of the deadliest terrorist acts on U.S. soil since 9/11. One of the perpetrators was Dzhokhar Tsarnaev. Tsarnaev and his older brother carried out the bombing after becoming radicalized through extremist propaganda. Following the attack, the brothers murdered MIT police officer Sean Collier during their escape attempt. After a multi-day manhunt that shut down the city of Boston, Dzhokhar Tsarnaev was captured alive. In 2015, he was convicted on multiple federal counts, including use of a weapon of mass destruction. He was sentenced to death, though his sentence has undergone multiple appeals and reinstatements. As of the latest confirmed rulings, Tsarnaev remains on federal death row. Due to the severity of his crimes, ongoing legal proceedings, and national security concerns, Tsarnaev was transferred to ADX Florence and placed under special administrative measures. Federal officials have stated that these measures are necessary to prevent radicalization of other inmates. Communication with extremist sympathizers. Public glorification of the attack. There is no public evidence that Tsarnaev has committed acts of violence while incarcerated at ADX Florence. His classification as one of the most dangerous inmates is based on the magnitude of his crimes and his symbolic significance within extremist circles. As of the most recent verified information, Dzhokhar Tsarnaev remains incarcerated at ADX Florence. Only one inmate remains. An individual whose actions inside prison, not outside, forced the federal system to confront the limits of control, containment, and human isolation. Number 1 is not the most famous. But by documented behavior alone, he may be the most dangerous inmate ever held at ADX Florence. Number 1, Robert Hanssen. At first glance, Robert Hanssen did not look dangerous. He wore suits. He attended church. He worked for the FBI. But Robert Hanssen is widely regarded by U.S. intelligence officials as the most damaging spy in American history. Between 1979 and 2001, Hanssen secretly passed highly classified information to the Soviet Union and later Russia. His betrayal compromised U.S. intelligence operations, exposed undercover agents, and, according to declassified assessments, contributed to the execution of American assets abroad. Hanssen pleaded guilty in 2001 to 15 counts of espionage and was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. Due to the unparalleled damage he caused and the ongoing sensitivity of the information he possessed, the Bureau of Prisons designated him for permanent confinement at ADX Florence under total isolation conditions. Unlike other inmates, Hanssen was held in near-complete solitary confinement for the remainder of his life. Former officials have stated that this was to prevent him from sharing intelligence details that could still pose national security risks. Hanssen committed no acts of physical violence inside prison. His danger was informational. In June 2023, Robert Hanssen was found dead in his cell at ADX Florence. The Bureau of Prisons reported his death as due to natural causes. No foul play was alleged. His case remains a defining example of why ADX Florence exists, not to punish, but to contain threats that cannot be neutralized any other way. ADX Florence is not a place of rehabilitation. It is a final measure. Every man on this list represents a documented failure of conventional incarceration, individuals whose actions forced the federal government to build the most restrictive prison in its history. This has been Beyond the Bars. If you found this documentary valuable, consider liking the video and subscribing. Your support allows us to continue producing deeply researched, factual crime and prison stories, without exaggeration, without myth. Thank you for watching.